Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 14 on stress, lifestyle, and health. Think about the last time you felt stretched too thin, couldn't turn your brain off at night, or noticed your body reacting to stress with headaches, stomach issues, or irritability. Stress shows up in traffic jams, group projects, money worries, caregiving, social media, and even big life transitions. Sometimes it pushes you to focus and perform. Other times it leaves you feeling exhausted or shut down. This chapter is about how those experiences connect your mind, body, and daily choices. In this chapter, we're going to explore what stress actually is, not just being busy, but a psychological and physiological process shaped by how you interpret events. Stress isn't just about having a lot going on. It's that wired feeling when your heart is pounding before an exam, the knot in your stomach when money is tight, or the shutdown that hits after too many demands pile up all at once. Stress is about how your body and mind respond to the pressures, changes, and demands in your life. Everyone in this course has already had a relationship with stress. School deadlines, job schedules, family responsibilities, health issues, social media drama, the list can go on and on. Sometimes it gives you a burst of energy and focus, and sometimes it leaves you exhausted, irritable, or numb. This chapter zooms in on those responses so they feel less mysterious and more understandable for you. If you had to rate your stress level over the last month or so on a scale from 1, which is very low, to 10, which is feeling very overwhelmed, where would you put yourself and what pushes that number up or down for you? Psychologists try to be more precise with the word stress than we usually are in everyday conversation. One way to think about it is a stimulus, so things that happen to you, like a breakup, a car accident, or a tuition increase. Another way is a response, the physical and emotional reactions you have, like tension, racing thoughts, or trouble sleeping. Neither view is complete on its own. A more helpful way is to see stress as a process that involves both what happens and how you interpret it. The exact same event can feel like a minor bump to one person and a crisis to another. Those differences come from the way each person evaluates what's happening and what resources they believe they have to deal with it. When something happens that could be stressful, your mind doesn't just a primary appraisal is your first judgment. Is this irrelevant to me, actually good for me, or a threat or challenge to my well-being? Getting a surprise day off might feel like a positive event, while an unexpected bill might feel threatening. If you decide something is threatening or challenging, your brain moves into secondary appraisal. What can I do about it? Do I have the skills, time, money, information, or support to handle this? If you believe you have options, the same event feels less overwhelming. If you feel powerless or alone with it, your stress level climbs. Two students can face the exact same exam. One thinks this is going to destroy me, I'm going to fail out. That's a threat response or the threat appraisal, high stakes and low belief in coping ability. The other thinks this will be tough, but if I study my notes and review the practice questions, I can do okay. That's a challenge appraisal. So recognizing the difficulty, but believing in their own capacity to respond to it appropriately. The event itself is identical. The appraisals are different. Threat appraisals tend to produce more intense and prolonged stress responses like tight muscles, racing heart, worry loops, while challenge appraisals are more likely to bring focused energy. Over time, patterns in how you appraise situations shape your overall stress load. But not all stress is bad. Eustress is the type of stress that feels energizing and motivating. It shows up when you're excited, engaged, and stretching yourself just enough, like starting a new job you've always wanted, competing in a sport that you've trained really hard for, or presenting on a topic that you are passionate about. Performance often follows a curve. With too little arousal, you feel bored and unmotivated. With moderate arousal, you're alert and performing at your best. With too much arousal, you feel overwhelmed and your performance actually drops. That's the Yerkes-Dodson idea. The goal isn't zero stress, it's finding a level of challenge where you can grow without continually tipping into overload. Think of a time when you felt a good nervous, so stressed but in a way that helped you to show up. What made that stress feel manageable instead of overwhelming? When people are surveyed about their daily lives, a large portion report moderate to high levels of stress on a regular basis. Many say their stress has increased over the past few years, not decreased. Common sources include money and job worries, school demands, relationship conflicts, health issues, and exposure to upsetting news or social media. That doesn't mean everyone is constantly in crisis, but it does mean stress is a fairly normal part of modern life. What varies a lot is how people are carrying that stress, whether they have coping tools, support systems, and some sense of control, or whether they feel stuck in a situation that keeps tightening in around them. Health psychology is the part of psychology that studies how thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and social environments interact with physical health. Health psychologists ask questions like, how does stress affect the immune system? Why do some people stick with behavior changes like quitting smoking, while others struggle to maintain them? And how do beliefs about illness shape whether people seek treatment? They work in hospitals, clinics, research labs, public health agencies, and community programs. They design interventions to reduce stress, promote healthier habits, support patients coping with chronic illness, and help medical teams communicate more effectively with patients. This perspective treats health as more than just not being sick. It looks at how daily choices and environments support or wear down the body over time. Stress is not distributed evenly across the population. When researchers break down stress reports by factors like gender, age, income, or ethnicity, they often find that certain groups consistently report higher levels of stress and more stress-related health problems. People living in poverty, facing discrimination, or juggling multiple roles with little support often carry a heavier load. This isn't about personal weakness, it reflects real differences in exposure to stressors and access to resources. Someone working two jobs with no health insurance and caregiving responsibilities is navigating a very different stress landscape than someone with stable income, childcare, and flexible work. Seeing those patterns makes it easier to understand why stress-related illnesses are more common in some communities and why social policies matter for public health. Walter Cannon was one of the first researchers to really map out the body's response to stress. He focused on homeostasis, the body's drive to maintain internal balance. When you face a perceived threat, your body quickly shifts away from that balance to prepare for action. Cannon described the fight or flight response, a rapid automatic reaction to danger. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing speeds up, blood rushes to large muscle groups, and digestion slows down. This response is adaptive when you need to run away, defend yourself, or respond quickly to an emergency. The problem is that a lot of our threats are emails, bills, arguments, things like that, things that you can't punch or run away from, but your body still flips the same switch. It doesn't really know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. The fight or flight response starts in the brain when something is interpreted as dangerous or highly important. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in, releasing adrenaline and noradrenaline. Physically, you might feel a pounding heart, sweaty palms, tense muscles, and fast breathing. Your pupils dilate, your mouth goes dry, and you might feel shaky or hyper alert or on edge. All of that is your body trying to help you to survive. More blood to the muscles, more oxygen, and sharper senses. In a true emergency, like avoiding a car crash, that response is exactly what you need. But if your body is flipping into fight or flight multiple times a day over traffic, notifications, or relationship conflict, those changes become wear and tear instead of protection. It's the biologically correct response given the state of your nervous system at that point in time, though again, the body doesn't always know the difference between real threats and perceived threats. Hans Selye noticed that animals exposed to different kinds of stressors, cold, heat, injury, noise, showed a similar pattern of physical response. He called this the general adaptation syndrome and described three stages. The alarm stage is that initial shock when a stressor hits and fight or flight turns on. The resistance stage comes next. The body stays activated but tries to adapt, using resources to cope with the ongoing demand. If the stressor continues for too long and resources are depleted, the exhaustion stage sets in. At that point, the risk of illness, burnout, and even death increases because the body can't maintain that high level of activation indefinitely. General adaptation syndrome helps explain why long-term chronic stress can be so damaging to the body. The graph shows how resistance to stress changes over time. At first, resistance dips as the body is shocked by the stressor. Then, during the resistance stage, resistance rises above normal as your body mobilizes to deal with the situation. If the stress doesn't let up, resistance eventually drops sharply in the exhaustion stage. This is when people might get sick more often, feel wiped out, struggle to concentrate, or develop stress-related health problems. It's not that one stressful week will break you, it's the pattern of being in the elevated resistance state for months or years without enough recovery that leads to the exhaustion. There are two major biological systems involved in the stress response. The first is the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers the fast fight or flight reaction through nerve pathways and adrenaline. The second is the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal cortex, which works a bit more slowly. When a stressor is perceived, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Cortisol helps provide energy by increasing blood sugar and influencing metabolism. In short bursts, it's really helpful. But if cortisol stays high for long periods, it can suppress the immune system, increase your blood pressure, and contribute to a range of health problems. Chronic stress isn't just all in your head, it literally reshapes how your body is functioning. Can you think of a time when your body clearly told you that you were under stress? Maybe through headaches, stomach issues, or feeling constantly tired or fatigued, even if you were trying to tell yourself that everything is fine. Stressors are the events or conditions that can trigger these responses. They come in different forms. We have traumatic events, which are extreme experiences like serious accidents, natural disasters, or assaults. Life changes, so involve major transitions like moving, divorce, or losing a job. Daily hassles are the smaller frustrations that pile up, like traffic, arguments, or technical issues. There are also background stressors like chronic financial strain, unsafe neighborhoods, discrimination, or an ongoing high pressure job. It's not just one category, it's the mix, the duration, and how many you're dealing with at one time. Acute stressors are short-lived. A pop quiz, a sudden argument, a flat tire, they spike your stress response and then pass. Chronic stressors are ongoing, caring for a sick relative, long-term unemployment, or months of conflict in a relationship. Chronic stressors are especially harmful because they keep your body's stress systems activated with little chance to fully reset. One important chronic stressor is job strain, which happens when job demands are high, but you have little control over how or when you do your work. Another is stressful relationships, where conflict, criticism, or lack of support are frequent. Strong supportive relationships can buffer stress, and strained ones can be a major source of it. Traumatic events involve exposure to actual or threatened death or serious injury. Things like military combat, assaults, natural disasters, and car accidents. Stressors in this category can often lead to the development of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, which is a chronic stress reaction including intrusive and painful memories, jumpiness, and persistent negative emotional states. Major life changes can be positive or negative and still be stressful because they require adjustment. Marriage, divorce, starting college, leaving college, moving, having a baby, losing a loved one, all include shifting routines, roles, and expectations. Holmes and Ray developed the social readjustment rating scale to estimate how much adjustment load different events carry. Each event on the SRRS has a number of lifestyle units, and higher total scores over a year are associated with greater risk of physical illness. Not everyone with a high score gets sick, but the pattern suggests that a heavy dose of change, even when some of it is positive, strains the body and the mind. Daily hassles are the small everyday irritations that can wear you down if they're frequent. Sitting in traffic, dealing with rude customers, misplacing your keys, technology breaking, small money problems, minor conflicts with family or roommates. On their own, hassles might seem trivial, but when they're consistent, they add up. Some research suggests that daily hassles can be stronger predictors of health problems than big single events because they keep your stress systems activated day after day. Think of them as tiny weights that eventually become heavy when you're never allowed to put them down. Certain jobs are consistently ranked as high stress, so first responders, nurses, doctors, teachers, air traffic controllers, social workers, and many others. These roles often include or involve high responsibility, emotional labor, exposure to trauma, or little control over schedules and demands. Long hours, shift work, and low pay can intensify that stress. Relationships can be either a buffer or a source of a major stressor. Supportive relationships provide comfort, encouragement, and practical help. Unhealthy ones add conflict, criticism, and emotional strain. When work stress and relationship stress collide, people may feel like there's no place to fully recover from one or the other. Looking at your own life, do you feel more stressed by big events or by the ongoing grind of smaller hassles and responsibilities? And what helps you get even a little bit of relief? Up to this point, we focused on what stress is and where it comes from. Now let's shift our focus to what stress does to the body over time. When stress is short term and followed by recovery, your body can handle it pretty well. When stress is chronic and layered, work, money, health, and/or relationships, it starts to show up as very real physical symptoms and diseases. Psychologists and medical researchers study how stress contributes to conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, headaches, asthma, and immune problems. Stress is rarely the only cause, but it often acts like gasoline poured onto a fire that's already there. Psychophysiological disorders are physical diseases that are influenced by stress and emotional factors. The symptoms are real and measurable in the body, not all in someone's head, but psychological stress plays a role in triggering or worsening them. So examples include hypertension, which is chronically high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, tension headaches and migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, and some forms of chronic pain. Stress can tighten muscles, alter blood flow, change hormone levels, and affect how sensitive you are to pain. Biological vulnerability and lifestyle also matter, but when you combine those with long-term stress, the risk of these disorders also increases. Your immune system is your body's defense network against infections and disease. Cells like lymphocytes, B cells, and T cells identify and attack viruses, bacteria, and other threats. Under ordinary conditions, this system helps a lot of potential problems under control without you ever noticing. Chronic stress can interfere with that system. High, prolonged levels of stress hormones like cortisol can suppress immune activity, making you more likely to catch infections or take longer to recover. Stress can also contribute to immune dysregulation, where the system overreacts or misfires, which is part of what happens in some autoimmune conditions. The main takeaway here is that ongoing stress doesn't just affect your mood, it can literally actually change how your body defends itself. One classic study by Sheldon Cohen and colleagues had volunteers report their recent stress levels and then, in a controlled setting, exposed them to a cold virus. Not everyone who was exposed got sick. The people with higher levels of chronic stress were significantly more likely to actually develop cold symptoms. This doesn't mean stress magically creates viruses. It means that when a virus shows up, and viruses always show up, people under more stress are less protected. The same exposure leads to different outcomes depending in part on the person's stress load. At the end of your chromosomes are telomeres, kind of like the plastic tips at the ends of shoelaces. Each time a cell divides, telomeres get a little bit shorter. When they become too short, the cell can't divide properly anymore. Shorter telomeres are associated with aging and increased risk of disease. Research has found that people under chronic stress, such as caregivers for seriously ill family members or those who experience severe early life adversity, often have shorter telomeres than those with lower stress. That suggests long-term stress may actually accelerate biological aging. It's one more way stress leaves fingerprints on your body over time. Cardiovascular disease includes problems like hypertension, heart attacks, and strokes. It's the leading cause of death in many countries. Stress interacts with cardiovascular health in several ways. Physiologically, repeated surges of blood pressure and heart rate strain the heart and blood vessels. Behaviorally, stressed people may smoke more, drink more, sleep less, and exercise less, all of which increase your risks. Emotional patterns like chronic hostility, anger, and anxiety can keep the body in a state of heightened arousal. And over years, this constant wear can damage arteries, contribute to plaque buildup, and make serious events like heart attacks more likely. Stress doesn't guarantee heart disease, but it stacks the odds when combined with other risk factors. Many people picture a classic heart attack as crushing chest pain, pain in the left arm, and sudden collapse. That picture is more typical of how heart attacks present in men. Women, on the other hand, can certainly have chest pain too, but they're more likely to have more subtler or more atypical symptoms like shortness of breath, nausea, back and jaw pain, fatigue, dizziness, or a feeling of pressure rather than sharp pain. Because these symptoms are easier to misinterpret as indigestion, flu, or just being tired, women's heart problems often go unrecognized or untreated later than men's. Knowing these differences is important both for you and the people around you, because early recognition and treatment can save heart muscle and save lives. Researchers once described people as type A or type B based on their behavior patterns. Type A individuals were characterized as competitive, time-urgent, impatient, and often hostile. Type B individuals are more relaxed, patient, and easygoing. Early work suggested that type A behavior was linked to higher risk of heart disease. Later research refined that view. The most toxic ingredient wasn't all type A traits, but hostility, cynical, mistrustful attitudes, and frequent anger. People high in hostility are more likely to have frequent conflict, interpret others' actions as negative ways, and experience more intense and prolonged physiological arousal. It's that ongoing pattern that appears especially damaging to cardiovascular health. The transactional model helps explain how hostility and health are connected. A hostile person is more likely to see others as threatening, rude, or disrespectful. They respond with anger or aggression. Other people then respond defensively or angrily back. Those reactions confirm the hostile person's expectations that the world is unfriendly and unfair. This back and forth creates a cycle of conflict and stress. Each negative interaction ramps up the body stress response, heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones, and over years, that repeated activation wears on the cardiovascular system. It's not just the feeling of anger, it's the pattern of interaction that keeps stress high. When you think about your own reactions, do you tend to assume the best or worst in other people's behaviors? And how does that affect your stress level in day-to-day situations? Depression and heart disease are really closely linked. People with depression are more problems, and people who have had a heart attack or heart surgery are at higher risk of becoming depressed. The relationship works both ways. Biologically, depression is associated with changes in stress hormones and inflammation, which can affect the cardiovascular system. Behaviorally, depressed people may have less energy to exercise, cook healthy food, or keep up with medical appointments. They may also be more likely to smoke or misuse substances as a way to cope. And all of this increases and can worsen outcomes after a cardiac event. Asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease of the airways. During an asthma attack, the airways become inflamed and narrowed, and the muscles around them tighten. This makes it difficult to breathe and can cause wheezing, coughing, and chest tightness. Asthma attacks can be triggered by allergens, infections, exercise, cold air, or irritants like smoke. Stress doesn't cause asthma from scratch, but it can trigger or worsen attacks in people who are already vulnerable. Stress-related changes in immune function and inflammation, as well as hyperventilation during anxiety, can contribute to breathing problems. People who experience chronic stress, especially in early life, appear to have a higher risk of developing asthma and more severe symptoms. This slide shows a visual comparison between a normal airway and an airway during an asthma attack. In the normal airway, the passage is open and smooth. In the asthmatic airway, the lining is swollen, mucus production may be increased, and the muscles around the airway are tightened, narrowing the space where air can pass. Link that back to stress. When someone with asthma is under heavy stress, their body is already in a heightened state. Add an allergen or respiratory infection on top of that, and it's easier for the airways to constrict. Managing asthma well often involves both medical treatment and attention to stress and emotional triggers. Coping is what you do to actually respond to stress, inside your head and outside in your behavior. Lazarus and Folkman describe two broad styles. Problem-focused coping means you try to change the situation causing the stress, so gathering information, making a plan, asking for help, negotiating, or taking direct action. Emotion-focused coping means you try to change how you feel about the situation, so venting to a friend, crying, distracting yourself, reframing your thoughts, or using relaxation techniques. Neither style is good or bad on its own. If you can change the stressor, problem-focused coping often helps the most. And if the situation can't really be changed, like a diagnosis or a past loss, emotion-focused coping becomes essential. Most people use a mix, and part of building resilience is learning which approach fits which situation and works best for you. How much control you believe you have over events in your life shapes your stress response. Perceived control is the sense that your actions can influence outcomes. Even small amounts of control, choosing a schedule, arranging your space, having a say in decisions, can lower stress and improve your health. When people feel everything is decided for them or that nothing they do matters, stress tends to feel heavier and feel more exhausting. You can't control everything, of course, but noticing where you do have choice, even small choices, can reduce that feeling of being trapped. Martin Seligman's work on learned helplessness started with animals exposed to shocks that they couldn't escape. After repeated uncontrollable shocks, the animals stopped trying to avoid. They acted as if nothing they would do would make a difference. Humans can fall into similar patterns with this as well. Even after enough repeated failures, rejections, or uncontrollable stressors, some people begin to believe it doesn't really matter what I do. That belief can show up in school, relationships, work, or health behaviors. Learned helplessness is strongly connected to depression as well. When people see negative events as permanent, it's like this will never change, pervasive, this affects everything, and personal, it's all my fault, they're more likely to shut down instead of trying new solutions. Can you think of an area where you kept trying until you found a way forward, and another area where you eventually stopped trying because it felt pointless? Social support is the network of people who show up for you. It comes in different forms. We have emotional support, so listening, validating, and comforting. Tangible support, like helping with tasks, money, rides, childcare. And informational support, like giving advice, sharing resources, or helping you think through the options. People with strong social support networks tend to have lower stress, better immune function, and better outcomes when they do get sick. Support doesn't mean fixing everything. Often it's about not feeling alone with what it is that you're carrying. Even one or two reliable people can make a big difference. There are many ways to lower stress responses in the body and in the mind. Exercise helps burn off physiological arousal and boosts mood chemicals like endorphins. Relaxation techniques like deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and guided imagery can shift your nervous system out of fight or flight. Meditation and mindfulness practices train attention and help you notice thoughts without getting pulled into every single worry. And other strategies like biofeedback, which uses equipment to get real-time information about your body and learning to change it. Hobbies that absorb your attention, time in nature, journaling, and building consistent sleep routines. Different tools work for different people, and not everything works for everyone. But the key is to practice it regularly and not try to use it as a one-time fix. It's a lot easier for your body to know what to do while utilizing a stress technique or a stress reduction technique if you already know how to do it and that it's going to be helpful for you. If you try to use techniques just kind of as a one off, that's typically where people say, oh, this doesn't work for me because I've tried it once and it didn't work. Shifting from stress and illness to well being, this part looks at happiness, sometimes called subjective well being. The focus moves from how does stress hurt to what supports a satisfying and meaningful life. This includes things like our emotion, our life satisfaction, and the activities and mindsets that nourish and help our mental health. Happiness isn't just a constant smiling or never feeling sad at all. Researchers often describe subjective well being as three pieces: frequent positive emotions like interest, joy, and contentment, relatively infrequent negative emotions like sadness, anger, or anxiety, and a sense that life is satisfying and has meaning. Someone can have a really rough day and still have high overall well-being if they experience their life as valuable and connected to what matters to them. Large surveys across countries usually find that most people report being at least moderately happy. There are differences by culture, income, and context, but the picture is more complex than everyone is miserable or everyone is thriving. Some societies face high levels of hardship and still report relatively high happiness, often tied to strong community and meaning. These findings challenge the assumption that external circumstances alone determine happiness. They also highlight how expectations, values, and comparison groups shape how people rate their lives. Several factors tend to show up alongside higher happiness: close supportive relationships, meaningful worker roles, physical health, and certain personality traits like extroversion and optimism. People employed and feeling relatively secure matters, but beyond a moderate level of income, more money adds less and less to happiness. On the other hand, chronic unemployment, serious relationship conflicts, and poor health are strongly linked with lower well being. Happiness isn't about having a perfect life, not by any means. It's about having enough stability, connection, and meaning that difficulties are easier to bear. People often overestimate how long a big event will affect their happiness. Winning the lottery, getting a dream job, or moving to a new city can create a spike in positive emotion. Losing a job, a breakup, or a health crisis, or having a health crisis can cause a drop. And over time, many people drift back toward a personal set point of well being. This process is called hedonic adaptation. It doesn't mean events don't matter. Some experiences change people really deeply, but it does mean that day to day habits, relationships, and thinking patterns often matter more over the long run than any single event. When researchers follow people across the lifespan, they see both stability and change in happiness. Many people show a fairly stable baseline with gradual shifts across major life phases like education, work, family changes, aging, and health changes. Some show long-term upward or downward trends tied to ongoing conditions or changes in their mindset. These patterns suggest that while there may be a temperamental component to happiness, it is not completely fixed. Circumstances, relationships, and intentional activities can nudge well-being up or down over time. Positive psychology focuses on strengths, virtues, and factors that help individuals and communities thrive. Instead of only asking what goes wrong, it also asks what goes right and how do we build more of that. This includes studying gratitude, forgiveness, hope, resilience, and character strengths like courage or kindness. Programs based on positive psychology often involve practices like gratitude journaling, identifying and using personal strengths, and building supportive communities. These approaches can increase well-being and buffer against stress and depression, especially when combined with other kinds of supports. Positive affect is the tendency to regularly feel positive emotions. Optimism is the expectation that both good things are likely to happen and that setbacks can be managed or overcome. Both are linked to better coping, healthier behaviors, and longer life. Optimistic people are more likely to take active steps when problems arise, seek help, and stick to treatment plans. It's not about pretending everything is great, but about believing that effort has a chance of making things better. Pessimism, in contrast, can feed learned helplessness and withdrawal. Flow is a state of deep engagement where you're so absorbed in an activity that you lose track of time and self-consciousness. It often happens when you're doing something that is challenging but matched to your skills. Too easy and you get bored, and too hard and it makes you anxious. Flow can show up in playing music, sports, art, gaming, coding, or even certain kinds of work or studying. People who regularly experience flow often report higher satisfaction and a stronger sense of meaning. Building more flow into life can be one way to increase well being alongside managing stress. What kinds of activities pull you into that time just disappeared state? And what would it look like to deliberately make a little bit more room for those? Stress weaves through nearly every part of life. So, how you understand it and how you respond to it matters for your body, your mind, your mood, your relationships, and your long term health. This chapter gives you language and frameworks to make sense of why two people can face the same event and have very different reactions, and why some seasons of life feel like a manageable challenge while others feel like a constant overload. As you leave this chapter, start noticing how your body and mind respond to everyday demands. When your heart rate changes, when your thoughts spiral, when you feel supported versus alone with your stress. Pay attention to what helps you cope, such as setting boundaries, reaching out to someone you trust, moving your body, changing how you're thinking about a situation, or anything else, and where small adjustments might protect you over time. Understanding stress and lifestyle and health isn't just about avoiding illness. It's about building a life that feels sustainable, connected, and worth caring for.